You ever wonder what's really going on with a student who's struggling? I mean, we see the behavior, we see the grades, but there's almost always a hidden story underneath all of that. Well, today we're going to dive right into that story. We're going to explore how these unseen wounds that students carry can totally derail their learning, and, more importantly, how a really simple shift in our approach, from fixing to just listening, can change absolutely everything.
Okay, picture this scene. It happens in schools all over the country. At a place called Fox Lane Middle School, they have these meetings they call MTSS meetings. It's a fancy acronym, but it's basically a group of really well-meaning teachers and staff armed with spreadsheets and data, all trying to figure out why a student just isn't making it. And they go through the whole playbook, right? They've got the behavior plans, the data logs, they're looking at test scores, incident reports. I mean, they're doing everything they've been trained to do. But here's the catch with this whole approach. All of these tools, they're looking at the student from the outside in. They track what the student does, but they completely miss the most important piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, what is the student actually going through? What are they feeling? What are they trying to tell us, not with their words, but with their actions? You know, this one question, it's the key. It unlocks a completely different and way more effective way of supporting our kids. It's this huge shift from trying to solve problems for them to finally understanding the problem with them.
So to get that story, first we have to just accept a tough reality. Behind all that data, there's usually a deep well of emotional pain. Some experts call these school wounds, and these wounds are the hidden engine behind so much of what we see as just bad behavior or a kid who doesn't care.
Let me tell you about a student named Marie. She was actually a pretty engaged math student, but then she got moved out of an advanced class, and her teacher told her she wasn't well equipped. Just one comment, but that one comment became a wound. It completely reshaped her identity. She started to believe, deep down, that she was just bad at math, and that belief kicked off this awful cycle of just checking out.
And these wounds, they don't just come from teachers. In today's world, they're happening between peers, all day, every day. As one teenager said after being cyberbullied, the whole thing just made them feel sick and worthless. This isn't just high school drama, you know. It's a deep emotional cut that directly affects a student's ability to even walk into a classroom and be ready to learn.
And this really gets to the heart of what we mean by school wounds. They're super personal, and the key word here is hidden. A student isn't going to raise their hand and say, "Excuse me, my academic confidence was shattered back in 4th grade." No, instead, they just stop trying. They become reluctant, because at some point, the school environment itself sent them a message that they just weren't good enough.
So let's zoom in for a second on one of the most common sources of these wounds today, the digital world. Because we have to understand, cyberbullying is not just the same old bullying with new technology. It is a fundamentally different beast, and in a lot of ways, a much more damaging one. And this chart really breaks down why it's so different. You know, with old school bullying, maybe a few kids saw it in the hallway. With cyberbullying, it can go viral in minutes. It's not just at school, it's on their phone 24/7. The bully could be anonymous, which makes it feel like the attack is coming from everywhere at once. And maybe worst of all, it creates a permanent digital footprint that can haunt a kid forever. And the scale of this problem is it's staggering. Get this. Recent data shows that 1 in every 4 middle schoolers has been cyberbullied in just the last 30 days. 1 in 4. Think about that. In a typical classroom of, say, 28 kids, that means 7 of them are probably navigating this digital war zone right now. This is not a small problem. It's an epidemic.
So when we're faced with these deep, often invisible wounds, what do we do? What's the solution? Is it some fancy new app or a new curriculum? Well, actually, it's something way more basic. It's a fundamental shift in our thinking from trying to fix students to simply and profoundly trying to understand them.
And this is the single most important takeaway. The solution isn't some complicated new program. The intervention is the act of listening. It's that simple and that powerful. When a student feels truly heard, that's when you build trust. That's when you validate what they're going through, and that's what opens the door to creating real solutions together. Okay, let's go back to Fox Lane Middle School for a minute, because this is how they put it into practice. They completely transformed their support system around this one idea. They stopped asking, "What's wrong with this student?" And they started asking, "What is this student trying to tell us?" They used tools like empathy interviews to get the student's story first, and then, and this is key, they designed a support plan with the student, not just for them.
But okay, if listening is the answer, why is it so hard for students to just speak up? Well, you have to understand their fears are very, very real. They're afraid telling an adult will just make the bullying worse, pour gasoline on the fire. They are terrified their parents will take away their phone, which to them is their entire social universe. And then there's that deep-seated fear of being called a snitch, or just that adults who didn't grow up with this stuff just won't get it.
So what's the solution? Well, a lot of research points to something called near-peer mentors. Turns out when you ask middle schoolers, they say they are way more comfortable talking about this stuff with someone who's just a little bit older, like a high schooler or an older cousin. These mentors are relatable. They speak the same language. They can be that perfect bridge between the student's world and the adult world.
So, how do we take all this and build an entire school culture around it? There's this amazing program in Minnesota called Compass, and it gives us a fantastic roadmap. They focus on what they call intentionally inviting practices, strategies that are designed to heal wounds, not just punish bad behavior. One of the most radical things they did had to do with one of the biggest sources of school wounds out there, grades. They looked at the classic A, B, C, D, F system and realized that for a struggling student, it's just fundamentally disinviting. So they got rid of Fs. Their system became A, B, C, or
Do it over. I mean, can you imagine anything more inviting than telling a student that they literally cannot fail? In their system, students have to revise their work until it's at least at a C level. This completely changes the meaning of failure. It's not a judgment on who you are anymore, it's just part of the process of learning.
And they layer this with dozens of other small but incredibly powerful habits. Things like greeting every single student at the door, hosting ball talks where teachers and students can just have open, honest conversations, a strict no put-downs rule. The entire culture was built around this one idea. Heal the wound, don't just put a Band-Aid on the behavior.
And the results? I mean, they speak for themselves. The average GPA for students in the Compass program for 2 years nearly doubled. It jumped from a 1.67 to a 3.20. Discipline referrals basically vanished. This just proves that an approach built on empathy and listening isn't just a nice-to-have idea. It gets unbelievable, measurable results.
And this brings us right back around to the final, most important point. This isn't just about schools. These principles of listening, of trying to understand the story behind the behavior, they apply to all of us, at our jobs, at home, with our friends. So the real question to walk away with is this: who in your life is trying to tell you something, not with their words, but with their actions? Who in your life really needs to be heard?